The man signed the contract barely a month ago. The pen had not even left the table before he had secured the most lucrative, stable deal of his professional life. 4 years of total security. A guaranteed seat through the 2030 World Cup cycle. Then, a match was played. The whistle blew. The man stepped toward the microphones, delivered 3 short sentences, and resigned. Nobody understood what had happened. The Federation was in shock. The fans were in shock. Even his closest confidants in the coaching world were left staring at their phones in disbelief. This was not supposed to happen. But in the landscape of modern football, the traditional rules of loyalty and logic are dissolving. This wasn't just a sudden departure. It was the first crack in a week that would see the global game's most prestigious institution start to tremble. A star player looked at the cameras and said, "I don't care." A locker room descended into bitter silence. A 56-year streak of German dominance collapsed in a single night under the cold glow of a VAR monitor. Right now, a host nation is stepping onto the grass, knowing that a single mistake will bankrupt their national project. This is the story of the craziest 48 hours in World Cup history, and it starts with a signature that meant nothing. The ink was barely dry in late May when Steve Clarke sat down with the Scottish Football Association. They shook hands. They smiled for the photographers. The result of that meeting was a historic extension, a contract that should have made Clarke the face of Scottish football for the next 6 years. For Scotland, this was more than a tactical decision. It was a lifeline. This is a nation that had wandered in the international wilderness for 28 years, failing to qualify for a single World Cup since 1998. Clarke was the architect of the resurrection. He didn't just qualify them, he dragged them to 3 major tournaments in a row. Euro 2020, Euro 2024, and finally, the 2026 World Cup. It was a miracle of consistency. That is exactly why the Federation handed him that long-term security. They wanted a steady hand on the wheel. They wanted a legacy. 30 days later, the legacy turned into a post-mortem. Scotland arrived at the group stage with hope, and for a moment, it looked like the plan was working. They faced Haiti and scraped a 1-0 victory. It was their first World Cup win since 1990. The fans in the stands were weeping. The Tartan army believed the curse was finally broken. But the joy was brittle. A 1-0 loss to Morocco followed, a game defined by missed opportunities and a strange, heavy fatigue in the Scottish legs. Then came the giants, Brazil. A 3-0 defeat that felt like a professional execution. Scotland finished with 3 points and a goal difference of -3. They waited. They watched the screens. They looked at the other groups, hoping to be one of the best third-place teams. When Croatia beat Ghana, the mathematics turned cruel. Scotland was out. The world expected a standard press release. "We are disappointed. We will learn. We go again." Instead, the public received an emotional open letter that felt like a suicide note for a career. Clarke thanked his players. He said reflecting on his 7 years left him with pride and satisfaction. Then he closed the door. He wished his successor good luck and walked away from the most secure contract in the sport. The Scottish FA scrambled. They called him their most successful coach ever, while simultaneously confirming he was gone. The shock was institutional. Why sign a 6-year deal if you plan to quit 30 days later? The Scottish FA's official statement focused on progress, but the silence behind the scenes was deafening. Some pundits suggest Clarke knew he had hit the ceiling. He had taken them to the dance, but he realized he could never make them dance with the elites. He saw the wall. He chose to leave before he crashed into it. Now, the Scottish FA is paralyzed. Homegrown talent is non-existent. The big names are locked in Premier League contracts. The man who rebuilt the house just burned the blueprints and left. But while Scotland was mourning a departure, Norway was dealing with a different kind of crisis. It was a crisis of attitude. Picture a star player, a man who earns millions of dollars to care about every blade of grass. Erling Haaland is the ultimate physical specimen of the modern game. Every goal he scores is analyzed by AI. Every miss is a national tragedy in Norway. His team had already secured their spot in the next round, a rare and precious moment of comfort for a nation that usually struggles on the big stage. Before their final group match against France, a reporter asked Haaland if the result mattered. The answer was a hand grenade. Haaland looked into the lens and said, "Honestly, I don't care too much about that game. We're through. I couldn't care too much about it." The backlash was instantaneous. He predicted France would win, almost dismissively. He spoke about his own national team as if he were a neutral observer watching from a penthouse suite. In a club environment, a manager would have fined him a week's wages before he finished the sentence. But this is the World Cup. His coach, Ståle Solbakken, had no choice but to manage the ego. He left Haaland on the bench. The result followed Haaland's script with haunting accuracy. France won 4-1. One French player walked away with a hat trick, while Haaland sat in a tracksuit, looking bored. The locker room was poisoned. There are players in that squad who have spent their entire lives dreaming of playing 90 minutes against France. They fight for every tackle. They bleed for the badge because they know they might never get back to this stage. For them, "I don't care" is not a mental trick, it is an insult. The media split down the middle. Some called it a masterclass in pressure management. They argued that by lowering the stakes, Haaland was saving his energy for the moments that actually mattered. Others saw it as the ultimate symptom of the superstar era. A player who feels he is bigger than the tournament itself. The debate raged for 3 days, becoming a referendum on the soul of international football. Then, the knockout round arrived. Haaland came off the bench in the 78th minute. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a nap. 10 minutes later, he latched onto a loose ball, shrugged off 2 defenders, and smashed the winning goal into the top corner. He sent Norway into their best World Cup run in decades. The man who didn't care became the hero of the people who cared too much. That is the paradox of modern power. You can spit on the traditions of the game as long as you can still produce the result. It was a win, but it felt like a loss for the concept of the national team. As Norway grappled with ego, Germany was facing an existential collapse. They are the Nationalmannschaft. They are the machine. Since 1976, the German national team had a psychological weapon that no other country possessed. They were unbeatable on penalties. In nearly 50 years, they had participated in 6 major tournament shootouts and won all of them. They had lost a shootout only once in their entire history, back when the world was a different place. That streak wasn't just a statistic. It was a ghost that sat on the shoulders of every opponent. When you play Germany, you don't want to go to penalties. You know you will lose. This week, they faced Paraguay. On paper, it was a mismatch. On the pitch, it was a nightmare. 90 minutes ended 1-1. Extra time was a grueling tactical slog that also ended 1-1. But inside that extra time, the world thought the machine had done it again. In the 112th minute, Jonathan Tah rose above the Paraguayan defense and headed a corner into the net. The German bench emptied. The stadium in San Francisco shook with the roar of a superpower asserting its dominance. But then, the game stopped. The referee, Jalal Jihad, was called to the monitor. VAR was breathing down his neck. The replay showed a collision between Germany's Valdemar Anton and the Paraguay goalkeeper, Orlando Gil. It was minimal. It was the kind of contact that happens in every corner of every game. But Jihad saw enough. He walked back onto the pitch and made the signal. Goal disallowed. The silence that followed was heavy. Alan Shearer, speaking on the BBC, was incandescent with rage. He accused the goalkeeper of conning the officials. He called the decision a joke. But the decision stood. The match went to penalties. For the first time in 56 years, the German aura evaporated. They looked human. They looked scared. When the final Paraguayan kick hit the back of the net, the streak was dead. Germany lost 4-3. A four-time world champion was eliminated in the round of 32 by the 34th-ranked team in the world. The press conference was a massacre. Julian Nagelsmann didn't use the measured tones of a diplomat. He was a man who had been robbed. He called the VAR decision a joke. He spoke with a sharp, visible frustration that bordered on contempt for the officiating standards of the tournament. The German Federation hasn't fired him yet, but the ground is moving. This wasn't just a loss. It was a humiliation of the German identity. A team that prides itself on efficiency and mental toughness was undone by a soft foul and a shattered streak. In one night, 50 years of fear disappeared. Now, every team knows that the Germans can bleed. They are no longer the monsters under the bed. They are just another big name with a broken defense. But the 48-hour window wasn't finished. As you are watching this, the lights are rising on another stage. The host nation is preparing for its own day of judgment. When the United States, Mexico, and Canada agreed to host this tournament, they didn't just sign up for football. They signed up for a massive commercial and political gamble. For the U.S. in particular, an early exit is not an option. The stadiums are packed with fans who have paid thousands of dollars for tickets. The sponsors have poured billions into the infrastructure. The television networks need a host nation deep in the bracket to keep the ratings from cratering. Tonight, the U.S. faces Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is not a game. It is a pressure cooker. We have seen what happens when the pressure becomes too much. We saw Steve Clark walk away from a fortune because the weight of the job became unbearable. We saw Holland treat the tournament like a casual training session because the expectations were too heavy to carry. We saw the German machine break under the scrutiny of a single slow-motion replay. Now, the hosts have to step into that same fire. They have seen favorites eliminated in seconds. They have seen legends resign via open letters. Every card, every VAR review, and every stray comment in a press conference is now a potential catastrophe. This wasn't a series of isolated mistakes. It was the inevitable friction of a tournament that has finally grown too large for its own soul. The 48-team format was designed to create more matches, more revenue, and more moments. But what it actually created was an environment of extreme volatility. When you expand the field, you don't just add more teams, you add more room for chaos. You create scenarios where stars like Holland feel they can take a night off. You create brackets where a single bad refereeing decision can destroy a 50-year legacy. The system was designed to maximize profit, but it has accidentally maximized the potential for total institutional collapse. Think about the Scottish FA. They are now hunting for a manager in the middle of a tournament they are supposed to be building toward. Think about the German FA staring at the ruins of their reputation. Think about FIFA watching their host nation teeter on the edge of a sporting disaster that would turn the rest of the tournament into a ghost town. The money is flowing, but the people who actually play and coach the game are starting to snap. The pressure is no longer a privilege, it is a poison. We look at these 48 hours and we see shocks. We see meltdowns. But if you look closer, you see a sport that is being pushed past its breaking point. The players are tired. The coaches are burnt out before their contracts even start. The referees are paralyzed by the technology that was supposed to help them. This World Cup was marketed as a celebration of the global game, but it has become a brutal test of survival. The winners won't be the ones with the most talent. They will be the ones who can maintain their sanity while the system crumbles around them. The host nation is on the pitch now. The fans are screaming, unaware of how fragile the whole structure has become. They see a game, The architects of the tournament see a balance sheet. The players see a mountain they are too tired to climb. We are halfway through the craziest window in the history of the sport, and the only thing we know for certain is that the old rules are gone. The contracts are paper. The streaks are memories. The heroes don't care. And the fans are left wondering if the game they love still exists under all that noise. In the corner of a quiet locker room, a discarded Scottish jersey lies on the floor. A manager's office is being emptied of its books and tactical boards. The ink on the new contract is finally dry, but the man who signed it is already home. The stadium lights are blindingly bright. The silence is becoming very loud. Is this still a World Cup?